So again, welcome to our fourth roundtable session. And we know today we've got a diverse group of members in the audience. Many of you are members of our most engaged, and some of you are completely new to this, which is fine. This is what we need in order to continue to move this work forward and to really begin to speak as one unified voice to the legislature about who we are and what we need. And one thing I really want to stress in this work is this project has been workforce led since the start. We began engaging with the workforce consistently in 2018. There was minor engagement in 2017, but in 2018, we really started engaging with the workforce, and we've used the unifying framework from NAEYC as a guidebook. And one of the things within the unifying framework is the audacious vision. If you've attended any other sessions, you've heard me read this many, many times, but I am going to set us in that again today. Each and every child beginning at birth has the opportunity to benefit from high quality, affordable, early childhood education delivered by an effective, diverse, well-prepared, and well-compensated workforce. And like I said, I've been reading that for quite a few years, and now what I feel is I can see the journey we've been on. We've actually begun to make changes. We've actually begun to live into some of those pieces, and we've actually begun making progress. The other thing I want to stress when we think about this work is a profession. What is it? A profession has distinct pieces in common: the name, early childhood education, early childhood educators, the roles, the responsibilities, the preparation for those roles, or we might call them designations, as well as accountability. And the unifying framework specifically described the early childhood education profession as the way forward to meeting the audacious vision. So here we are with the next step being recognition by the state of Vermont that creates a sustainable, accessible, and transparent system of professional licensure that centers around quality and equity that works for everyone: children, families, early childhood educators, hiring program directors, and the public. So we know historically there's been a lot of changes in the early childhood system, and those changes were not always supported. But this is very, very different in the sense that we have had early childhood educators at the center of this work since the start and have been collecting the recommendations by those early childhood educators and making sure to inform policymakers of what you needed. To date, we've talked to more than 1,000 early childhood educators. We've collected, discussed, tested, and come to consensus on the feedback that has been shared and made sure that the educators themselves have been engaged at every step of the way. And you'll see, looking at that slide in front of you, up in the top left are some numbers that are historic numbers of our outreach and engagement. And then over on the right is where we are right now with the Office of Professional Regulation. So we have submitted an application to the Office of Professional Regulation, also the acronym OPR. We often use that. Their responsibility is to make recommendations, to regulate professions, and to also research the goal of what those recommendations should be. So we have submitted an application to OPR to be reviewed, and we're waiting right now. Any day we should get the responses back from them about what their recommendation is around creating a profession. At the same exact time, we've had a work group that has been, you'll see down in the lower right, or excuse me, lower left, multi-year workforce-led process. We had a work group that has been finishing up a draft proposal to be put into this year's legislative process. So both of these pieces are happening simultaneously. OPR will be giving us their recommendations within the next few days, maybe week, as well as this policy will be headed into the legislative session. So Susan, if you want to go to that next slide that I always overlook. So some of the things about policy change, these are sometimes uncomfortable, but we do need to just accept them. And really, I like to use the term trust the process. We can recommend, but we cannot guarantee when a bill is entered into the legislature what happens with it. We can propose and others will make changes to it. Very few bills enter and go through the process of the House and Senate and committees without changes. We can ask for it all and we may not get it, and we may not get it all at once. So again, we need to make peace with that, and we need to trust the process. We need to know that we've taken it as far as we can and hand it over. And that's why our unified voice is so, so incredibly important. We can be pragmatic and not expect perfection, but we need to celebrate the successes. The legislature will decide the things that need to be changed. And as early childhood educators, we need to stick together to be unified to pass this bill for the best legislation. We are the first state in the nation to make a proposal to our legislature, but there are many other states that are working close behind us. And we know we cannot become a nationally cohesive profession without all 50 states joining in. So others working close behind us are Connecticut, Delaware, DC, Minnesota, Missouri, New Mexico, and Virginia. And we're excited to see that their work will eventually add to the national cohesion that we're looking for.
First, I wanted to let you know that a member of Let's Grow Kids were the ones that first introduced me to the idea of professionalizing our field at a Vermont Early Childhood Network meeting that I was attending. The members in my network were excited about professionalizing the field and supported moving forward, and I was excited as well. However, I was also immediately concerned about representation in the task force for home educators, particularly for educators with no degree. So shortly after that meeting, I asked to become a member of the task force and have served in that capacity since its inception. I approached my work with one idea. I would speak for educators without a degree and ensure that no one in the current workforce was left out. Little did I know that while serving on the task force, I will also come to realize that if we want to be recognized as professionals, we must be willing to hold ourselves accountable and put in the work to demonstrate that we have the skills necessary to be recognized as early childhood educators. I will continue to advocate for every educator, and the entire task force has worked to honor each educator, no matter their educational background. We have all agreed that years of experience and professional development need to be counted, and that there needs to be time and support to allow educators to complete the necessary steps to obtain their ECE licensure. Our vision is to create a pathway to licensure with a mentor and technical support to help you walk through the process. We don't know what that looks like right now, but we do know that we must create a process that ensures every educator has the support and time they need to obtain their license. Today, I am just as excited about professionalizing early childhood education as a field as I was when the idea was first presented. With professionalization, we will no longer be seen as babysitters or daycares. We will have a recognized profession and as such be respected and valued as a critical part of Vermont's workforce. We still have a ways to go, and we will continue to seek your input. So please know that your voice is valued and we are listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Tammie, for sharing that. Staci?
Hi, everyone. I was invited to join the task force and to explore what it would take to professionalize the field of early childhood education. In the early stages, as we began meeting and delving into the complexities of this, the scope felt overwhelming and challenging to fully grasp. I frequently reminded myself that this work is aimed at supporting future educators with systems in place to help the current workforce transition and meet the qualifications for ECE 1, 2, and 3. The task force currently includes 3 family child care home educators, and we have worked diligently to represent the unique perspectives and needs of family child care home professionals. I'm always encouraged by the responsiveness of the task force to our input and concerns. As family child care educators, we're often undervalued and not recognized as professionals. We're often frequently referred to as babysitters, and a lot of times families are sometimes advised to move their children to real preschools or centers. Despite the dedication and expertise we bring to our work, we are not always acknowledged as professionals in the broader educational landscape. Professionalizing the field would not only validate the skills and knowledge of educators, but also ensure that they receive the respect,
the resources and support necessary to continue to nurture children's growth and development. Additionally, this shift would still instill confidence in families regarding the quality of education and care their children receive, empowering them to make informed decisions about the best learning environment for their child. It's important to acknowledge that this process has been underway for nearly 5 years and can be challenging to fully appreciate, particularly for those who have not been involved from the beginning. The field of early childhood has undergone significant changes in recent years, and while this initiative may seem like a substantial undertaking, considerable effort has been devoted to ensuring that robust support systems will be available to help educators navigate the licensing process. A common question I hear is, aren't we already licensed? What's the difference? While our programs are licensed, individual educators are not. Individual licensure would affirm that each professional meets specific standards of qualification, facilitating career mobility and easing transitions, whether to new roles within the field or to positions even in other states. This shift would provide a clearer pathway for recognition and growth, further elevating the profession and its impact. The work being done is not just about compliance, it's about fostering a future where early childhood educators are universally recognized as essential, skilled professionals. This effort is a critical step toward transforming perceptions, enhancing support, and ultimately improving outcomes for educators, families, and children.
My name's Nicole Walker, and I'm the director of Apple Tree Learning Centers in Stowe and Morrisville, and I've worked there for over 21 years, started in the infant classroom, and I've worked in many of our programs and have been the director for about 15 years. I remember when I first heard about this field becoming professionalized, I remember sitting, I believe it was in the snowflake, in the circle on a floor, and we were brainstorming the concept of this field becoming a profession and what that would look like and what that would feel like. And I remember having to discuss what we were excited about and what made us a little bit nervous, what we were concerned about. And it was a really good brainstorming session. And then it was months and probably even years later when I remember getting an email asking me to become part of the task force and things like that. And for me, that was an easy yes. I mean, prior to this experience that I'm having now, I had attended a few of the workshops and I was slightly familiar about this profession or this process of it becoming a profession, but not as much as I know now. So when I got this offer, it was an easy yes for me. I thought it was a great opportunity for me to become involved in this and to hear from other people and just be part of the process. It's been over a year for me now since being on this committee or the task force. And when I have to be honest, when I first heard about this way back all those months and years ago, it was very unsettling. And even when I first joined the task force, it was unsettling. Unknown can be scary. Change is scary. I started thinking about how this would affect my team, my staff, all these people I cared about. What journey would they have to take? What trainings would they have to take? What path would be their journey? And how would I convince them to do this? So it obviously was incredibly overwhelming. But as time has gone on, I've become more and more excited about it. I've obviously have learned that people making a lot of these decisions or coming up with these ideas are educators ourselves, and we're taking information that we learn in the field from our own teams and from other programs surrounding us, etc. And that's how we're drafting some of this information. So it's from real people that are in this field and actually know and care and are just as passionate as I am about it. It doesn't say that there isn't still that little bit of fear. However, I think that we're on the right path, and it feels like this is the time to really help promote and advocate for this change. I feel like at this point, we've been viewed as daycare providers or babysitters and all of that for far too long. All of us on this call and anyone in this field knows that we're so much more than that. Sure, we do play with children during the day. You're absolutely correct. But we all know that there's far more to play than just play. We're teaching children so many skills and so many concepts. and we're really helping them, you know, get ready for the next step of kindergarten. And play is learning. You know, children do learn through play and social interactions, and that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And I feel very strongly and passionate about that. And I think it's time for everyone to sort of try to wrap their head around and understand that we are educators, we are teachers, and what we do for work each and every day is equally as valuable to public school teachers and et cetera, other professions that are considered a profession. I think becoming a professional means so much to our educators. It's far more than the compensation and the benefits and all of that sort of stuff. That's really important and super critical into this process. However, just being recognized as a professional by our community members, by our states, by our colleagues, and everybody just feels so powering and so, I don't even know what the right word is, but it just feels like it's the right thing. And it feels like having that level of respect from our community is within itself very powerful. So I feel very strongly that this is the right step, and that while it is scary, change is hard, it's challenging, it's confusing, there's always so many unknowns. I do feel very strongly that this is the next best step for us in our profession. However, we're not done with this until we meet our goal. I think that we all have to work together to get this accomplished. We have to share our stories, have our voices heard, encourage others to share their voices, and to advocate. We all deserve this. And while it's scary and it feels unsettling, I feel like it's time to help everybody understand and to try to wrap our heads around this work. I think we have a very unique process of working through change, and it's not easy. However, I have the confidence that if we all remain positive and strong and advocate, that we can all accomplish great things.
Thank you, Nicole. It's great to hear from you and great to hear so much about your story and experiences. Jen, we'd love to hear from you next.
So hi everyone, I'm Jen Olson. I am an early childhood educator at Wren's Nest Forest Preschool in Bristol. I've been teaching in Vermont for about 15 years in center-based programs in infant, toddler, and preschool classrooms, and spent 8 years at the UVM Campus Children's School as a mentor teacher, working with children and families and undergraduate early childhood education students. And I really appreciate you all being here tonight. So I really can't think of a time professionally when this, like the ideas behind this work have not been something that have been on my mind. I wouldn't consider myself like a grass is always greener sort of person, but I am a deeply reflective individual and always looking for ways to improve like my own practice and systems that I interact with or feel like could, you know, always like do a little bit more. And so I came up through the ECE program at UVM as an undergraduate, and then got my master's in educational leadership from UVM. And so I just felt like I've always had an interest in policy and advocacy and the intersection of what I was noticing as a teacher in the classroom and what this opportunity provided it was just like the crosshairs of everything that I was really passionate about. So let me like set the stage a little bit. I can completely remember the day that the first workforce engagement project report came out regarding advancing ECE as a profession. We just basically done like conversations with intent and surveys to see like, are people interested in moving this forward? And so I was like walking around in my backyard reading the results, and they basically said like, yes, there is collective will for moving this forward and advancing as a profession. And that was incredibly affirming to read. I was just like, yes, we're on the same page. And I had just finished a course for grad school in database decision making and was trying to study ECE And I was like the only person in my cohort that was looking at ECE, and just like really researching and doing a deep dive, trying to understand like how teachers were so devoid of opportunities to participate in decision-making processes within the field. So devoid of opportunities to like be even invited to the table where policy conversations were happening. And in all those places, it seemed like teacher voices would have greatly impacted the policies. And so the whole idea, that, or like the motto that's kind of been running through this work around like nothing about us without us, really resonates with me, because it was like, yeah, we have felt changes sort of implemented upon us and to us, but this was a grassroots movement. This was like an initiative with teachers and directors and people in the field having agency and leading conversations and participating in decision-making processes about like themselves, their work, their governance. And so it was shortly after that report came out that I joined the task force. And that was in 2019. So we first met like right before COVID hit. And I've been on the task force ever since. And basically, at that time, there was excitement and concern, just like there continues to be today. And for me, what that means is like, that makes a lot of sense. That's totally valid. This is a dynamic process. I look at the application to OPR. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it's incredible. It's like such a powerful piece of documentation that attests to the many considerations and conversations that the workforce has been having over the last 8 years. And I think the fact that we can hold both those feelings of like excitement and uncertainty, or, feeling in anticipatory distress about like handing this over, means that this is really important, that this is like really valuable. And so I love that juxtaposition. And today I'm still here doing this work because it feeds me being in community with other educators who are deeply, deeply passionate about early childhood education and want to think intellectually about it, that's my jam. So when I think about what it would mean for early childhood education to be recognized as a profession, I think like that's $1 million question. Like, how much time do we have? But to be brief, I think it means that there is a fundamental shift in recognizing, understanding, and valuing the work of caregiving and educating our youngest citizens, like Nicole was talking about, and recognizing that those youngest citizens are so, so deserving of that opportunity. And so children having the right to high quality ECE, and families having a right to accessing and trusting a system of ECE that's designed to support them from the moment they start looking for care, is a big part of what this work is about. I am still like relatively new to being a parent. I have a 2-year-old, and I feel like it's put it in to like a completely different perspective now than it was ever before. And I just cannot get this analogy out of my head that like I've never walked into the doctor's office with him unsure of the qualifications of the people like who are going to treat him. And I want the same for early childhood education. So like you can walk into any program regardless of the setting, that the educators are highly qualified, well compensated, accountable. Professionalizing the workforce grants families that opportunity, as well as educators the opportunity to be recognized and compensated for the incredibly important work that they do. And in closing, I also think that this is like sort of sentimental, but it feels like professionalizing the workforce also means continuing the work of the educators who came before us, like the generation of mentors and people who taught us and believed in the same mission that we are trying to like bring forth today, and see and yeah, it's like carrying the torch. And I think this is like most definitely the most important thing we can be doing as humans. So I'm all for it. And I'm really grateful that you're all here to share share with us.
Appreciate both of you taking time to join us today and sharing your thoughts. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Susan, our project coordinator, and she's going to walk us through some of the pieces of where we are right now, as well as, drum roll please, the highly awaited timeline. Susan?
That's funny, Rachel. Here we go. Okay, so Rachel gave you the foundation, sort of how we got to where we are now. And I feel like Tammie and Staci spoke to the heart of this. My job is to share some of the details. So as Rachel said, the legislature may agree with some or all of what we're proposing. We don't know yet what's going to happen. If that happens, though, it's not too early to begin thinking about implementation. What might it look like? What would a suitable timeline be? And what resources are needed? And so after I share these slides with you and some of this information, we're going to be asking you to talk about resources that you think will be important. We're particularly thinking today about family child care folks. However, if you have another perspective, that will be helpful for you to share as well. So just to recap, where we're headed is the idea of one profession with 3 designations, and that there would be a birth through age 8 license to practice. And I want to just kind of review these 3 designations to make sure everyone has a good sense of them. The ECE 1, Early Childhood Educator 1 designation, the scope of practice there is to serve in a support role. And the educational requirement is completion of at least 120 hours of an ECE 1 preparation program, and all of these would include some practicum experience. We've recommended, if you've been to one of our earlier roundtables, we've recommended a package of 3 courses at Community College of Vermont, which hit the professional standards and competencies that are needed, and people can then build on them as they build a career in early childhood education. So that's ECE 1. ECE 2, that designation, the scope of practice is to serve as a lead educator in birth through age 5 settings, with the caveat, of course, we know that with universal pre-K, you need to be pre-qualified. There's a requirement for AOE licensure connected to that. However, the scope of practice here is to be able to lead groups of children. And the education requirement there, and again, we're thinking future system, right, is an early childhood educator associate degree. And you also, I should point out, as you look at the rectangles across, you see that the compensation should increase as people do further their education and become and receive other credentials. And then the third designation, ECE 3, the scope of practice is to serve as a lead educator in birth through 8 settings, and the education requirement is a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. So keep those things in mind. And when we look at the next slide, when we're thinking about implementation, this comes from the unifying framework, and I believe we in Vermont are doing our best to wrap our arms around these implementation commitments, that we won't advocate for increased requirements without also advocating for the funding, supports, compensation, a realistic implementation timeline, really acknowledging the challenges faced by the workforce, particularly those in family childcare, home programs, and small community-based centers, that we're really working to mitigate unintended consequences, which is why we keep coming back to the workforce and saying, you know, so what do you think of this? What do we need to be thinking about? And that there are meaningful pathways for advancement. So again, think future workforce here. The steps for a license to practice for the future workforce would be to complete an approved preparation program with field experiences, to pass a national assessment. That, by the way, does not exist yet. There's a national commission working on that. It will at some point in the future, and to gain a license to practice from a state board. So you can see, of course, this is future. These things don't exist yet, but it's where we're headed, where we're hoping to be headed. So then we need to be thinking about the current workforce and what are the transitional, Staci referenced this, what are the transitional provisions that are going to create a bridge for the current workforce of experienced, skilled educators to become licensed, to enter the profession with all of the professional skills and competencies that they've gathered through years of experience. Because it's really important for us to bring everyone along with us who wants to go along, right? So here are a few of the transitional provisions. You may be aware of this when we talked about this in an earlier roundtable, that we are recommending that requirements for those approved preparation programs be waived for some current educators. We think we should honor the equivalence that's built into the Northern Lights career ladder to build on the system we already have in place, specifically. And here, for example, if you have a career ladder 2 certificate, no matter what the evidence that you provided to get that certificate, that you would qualify for an ECE 1 license. If you have a career ladder 3B certificate, and for example, you know that could be an associate's degree in early childhood education. It could be in a related field. It could be in an unrelated field with some ECE credits. We're advocating and recommending that any of those credentials could qualify for an ECE 2 license, and similarly for a career ladder 4A or beyond. So we want to really build on the career ladder which already exists, and that's why we've been recommending and encouraging people to get the highest level of career ladder certificate that you're eligible for. Another transitional provision has to do with flexible approaches to demonstrate competencies. And so again, we talked about this in an earlier roundtable. The recommendation is that there be ways to show evidence of competencies, and we built this around 4 community college courses that we've crosswalked to say, do these hit all of the competencies for early childhood education 2? And so the courses you can see are listed there. And we think there should be 2 options. Some folks have actually taken the courses. They may not have completed an associate's degree, but they have taken the courses. They should be able to provide a transcript that says, I have successfully completed these courses. The other option is folks who have not taken the courses, but have built those competencies through their experience and professional development, that there be a couple of options through prior learning assessment at community college that people can choose from to show, yes, I have these. And then we think that should lead to an ECE 2 transition license. We'll talk about that a little more in just a minute. And that's a license that allows ample time for people to complete any other requirements to convert to an ECE 2 license that can be renewed repeatedly. The transition license builds in time, and then the ECE 2 license, it can be renewed. I hope that makes sense to you. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So the other parts of transitional provisions have to do with timeline, which we'll look at next, that this be phased in over time, that there be a suitable timeline, and also that it be accompanied by additional investments. Act 76 started that, and extensive supports. And that's where we're going to be asking you for some of the thoughts that you have around that. So let's take a look at this. And again, I want to stress that we think this is the soonest that the timeline might stretch out, might be triggered. Rachel talked about what had happened in years leading up to this. She also talked about the recommendations that we've submitted to the Office of Professional Regulation. They'll be delivering their report to the legislature along with accompanying legislation. Now, if a bill passes in July, that's a big if, we don't know, then this is what we think the timeline could look like. We think it would take a couple years from 2025 to 2027 to stand up a state board of early childhood education and to get all of the processes in place that will be needed for people to go through obtaining a license to practice. So we think that might take a couple years. Then we're recommending that there be 2 more years as that board is stood up for people to get their initial license. And that's whether it's an initial ECE1, ECE2, or ECE3 license, or whether it's that ECE2 transitional license, right, that builds in time for individuals to complete any other requirements. And then we're recommending that the ECE2 transitional license be good for 5 years, right? And so that would be 5 years during which individuals could complete any other requirements. And then the transition license ends, and by 2034, the profession is fully stood up. So that's sort of the soonest. If you take it from where we are now to 2034, we're talking about roughly 9 years. So let's talk about some of the things you might be thinking about in choosing your path. These are going to be helpful questions to be thinking about. Where are you now in terms of your credentials, your scope of practice, what you want to continue to be doing with young children, or even whether you want to extend to a higher level of expertise. Where do you want to be? What ECE designation suits where you see yourself and your continuing work? What are your options? What's the timeline, and what resources and supports do you need? I'm not suggesting you answer all those questions right now, but I think those are going to be helpful ones to guide kind of your choice of path. So put together a few examples here just for how this could look. There's no way in a roundtable session of this duration that we could sort of walk you through all the different possible scenarios. People are in so many different places with their careers, but this will give you a few ideas of how it could look. So let's say someone had a Career Ladder 1 or 2 certificate, and they were working as a lead. And again, I'm thinking about family childcare here. So family childcare folks are working as a lead with groups of young children, and they want to continue with their scope of practice well into the future. So a pathway would be to choose one of those prior learning assessment options at Community College of Vermont, like a focus portfolio, to show the competencies and get an ECE2 transition license by 2029. So that's 4 years, right, from 2025 if legislation were to pass. And then there would be 5 years to complete any requirements for the associates in early childhood education and convert to an ECE2 license that can be renewed. So 4 years plus 5 years. Let's say this individual has a Career Ladder 1 or 2 and had been planning on retiring sometime in the not too distant future. So again, this individual could say, I'm going to go through the PLA process to show my competencies. I'm going to get my transition license, and then I'm going to do ongoing PD, but I'm planning to retire before 2034. And so this would be another way this could play out. One more slide to share a couple more examples. You may recall that the Career Ladder 3A, that's the one where you might have an apprenticeship, completed the apprenticeship program in early childhood education, or you might have the childcare certificate or a certain number of credits in early childhood education. And let's say you want to continue in your current scope of practice, leading some groups of children. And here there are two different kind of scenarios. One is the individual who says, I need and want an extended time frame. I've got a lot of other things going on in my life. And so that person could show a transcript showing completion of the 4 courses, get an ECE2 transition license, and then complete the associate's degree, the rest of the coursework needed to convert to an ECE2 license. Let's say that person said, I want an accelerated time frame. I want to just get this done. So they could be diving into the rest of the coursework to complete an associate's degree and get an ECE2 license by 2029. So no transition license in this scenario. We got data from CCV and asked them, how long do early childhood educators typically take to complete an associate's degree? And this was the data that they shared with us. The shortest was 2 years, typical was 4, and the longest was 6. So this timeline looks like it should work with what people have typically done. And so here are some examples, and I know there's no way, there's so many different situations that people have. There's no way to include all the examples in a short session like this, but we tried to pull a few that seem like they might be useful and relevant for center-based folks. So let's say someone had a career ladder 1 certificate and wanted to continue in a current scope of practice of a support role. What we would recommend is for them to, and again, we did an earlier roundtable on this, the ECE 1 preparation pathway is 3 courses through Community College of Vermont. That's what we're recommending. And then they would be able to apply for an ECE 1 license by the time that window is, while that window is open, right? The reason for this is it's stackable, that anybody who's starting out in a career in early childhood education would want to do work that they could then build on. So those are a couple of scenarios. Let's say someone had a career ladder 3A, and you may know that's they've been through the apprenticeship program in early childhood education, or they have a childcare certificate, or they have, and I'm forgetting the number, they have a substantial number of coursework in early childhood education. And so let's say I want to continue in my current role as a lead, and I want to do it on an extended time frame. So this person would, who's already taken the courses, would submit a transcript and apply for a transition license. And then they would have 5 years to complete their associate's degree and convert to an ECE 2 license that can be renewed. Let's say this person said, I want to do this fast. You know, I've got time right now and this works in my life. So within 4 years, and again, that's standing up the committee, the board, and then 2 years to apply. This person could say, I'm going to complete my associate's degree. I already have a lot of credits. I need to do the general ed classes. Here's an example of a 3B, and that's the one where the individual has an associate's degree in some field. And so again, getting that career ladder 3B certificate, we recommend would enable them to apply for an ECE 2. So that's several examples. I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Susan. That was very helpful information. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into a conversation with intent. So our goal is really to learn from you of what you need in order to be a licensed member of this newly recognized profession. It's about continuing to elevate your voices and implementing the pieces that we are going to need to stand up in a thoughtful and intentional way.